What would your younger self say about how your family turned out?
Every single year, like clockwork, my brother's birthday would turn into a production: caterers, signature cocktails, themed decorations, Instagram photographers, live musicians once, and enough congratulatory toasts to make it feel like he'd won the Nobel Prize, not just survived another trip around the sun. And every single year, mine would vanish into the ether, as if the date didn't exist, like some inconvenient footnote they chose to ignore. My name would be missing from the family calendar, absent from group texts, left out of dinner plans, and somehow, despite all the technology in their hands, it just slipped their minds. The first time it happened, I was 10. Brian had just turned 12 and gotten a brand new bike, plus the surprise party in our backyard with 20 kids, a clown that creeped everyone out, and an ice cream truck. I didn't mind that much back then. I figured maybe they were just busy, maybe they'd make it up to me later. When I finally asked my mom why no one had even said happy birthday, she blinked like I'd reminded her to take the trash out. "Oh no, sweetheart, was that today?" She hugged me quickly, like a quick apology would erase the fact that I had spent the entire day in my room, waiting for someone to knock. By the time I was 17, I knew better than to wait. That year, I baked my own cake. Chocolate, with those tiny confetti sprinkles I always loved. I set it on the counter and went to my part-time job. When I came back, half of it was gone and no one had said a word. My dad asked if there was any whipped cream left, and Brian, laughing with his friends in the living room, yelled out, "Nice cake, loser." Not a single candle. Not a single card. I moved out when I was 20. Got a cheap apartment that always smelled like someone else's cooking and spent most nights either studying or working late. I didn't mind. At least it was quiet. At least no one in that apartment complex forgot my birthday because no one there even knew it. That kind of loneliness hits different, but it's honest. Meanwhile, Brian's life rolled out like a red carpet. College paid in full by our parents, a car before he even passed the test, and job interviews lined up for him through family friends. When I got my degree, no one came to the ceremony. They claimed they thought it was next month. Brian got a graduation party with engraved invitations, a photo booth, and a toast my dad gave with tears in his eyes. I watched the video later, sitting alone in my apartment, pretending not to care. I stopped bringing it up. It felt pathetic, like pointing out a joke everyone else was in on except me. My birthday became something I marked in quiet ways: a glass of wine, a long bath, a movie I'd seen a dozen times. Every year, I promised myself I wouldn't let it get to me, and every year, some small part of me still waited for something: a message, a call, a flower on the porch. It never came. Brian thrived under the spotlight. He wasn't cruel, exactly. He just never noticed when I wasn't included, or maybe he did and didn't think it mattered. He'd joke that I liked being alone, that I was low maintenance, that I didn't like parties anyway. And that line, "You're not really into that stuff, right?" became the excuse my parents clung to for everything they forgot. When I hit 30, my birthday came and went with nothing but a spam email from a cupcake shop offering me a discount. I bought one cupcake, ate it in the car, and sat there wondering what it would feel like to be celebrated. Not extravagantly. Not with musicians or rented venues. Just remembered. Just once. Then, last year, something changed. My company had a record quarter. I had been quietly working on a product redesign that turned out to be the turning point. My manager called me into her office, smiling in that way that usually meant I had to clean up someone else's mess. But instead, she handed me a sealed envelope and said, "You earned this. And don't you dare tell anyone how big it is." It was a bonus, bigger than anything I had ever seen in my life. Not a raise. Not a promotion. A one-time thank you that felt like validation in pure, spendable form. And I didn't tell a soul. Not my parents. Not my brother. Not even my closest friend. I let them keep thinking I was just steady. Quiet. Background noise in the family narrative. Fast forward a few weeks. Brian's birthday came, and it was the usual circus: outdoor venue, 2 bartenders, one of those ridiculously expensive cheese tables, and guests arriving in outfits that cost more than my rent used to. I went, dressed nice, smiled politely, drank the wine they served, and scrolled Zillow under the table. I had already narrowed it down to 3 listings. Lakefront homes. Far enough away to feel like freedom, close enough to drive to on weekends. My bonus could cover the down payment, the furnishing, and still leave me enough to sit comfortably for a while. 2 weeks before my birthday, my mom called. "Sweetheart, I just wanted to say, we're really strapped this month. You understand, right? We can't do much this year. Maybe just a little dinner sometime in the future." She didn't say birthday. She didn't need to. I told her not to worry. That I was fine. And I meant it. Because this year, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't baking my own cake or hoping for a text. I was making an offer. A real estate agent named Linda sent me the closing papers the day before my birthday. I signed them with a glass of champagne and the biggest smile I'd had in years. Then I posted a single photo to my feed. No caption. Just the view from my new back porch, where the lake shimmered under a sky so wide it made everything else feel small. That's when the messages started. My mom, my dad, even Brian. One after the other. And I didn't reply. Not yet. I had learned over the years that silence could be a sanctuary. Not the silence of resentment or retreat, but the deliberate kind, the kind that lets you build without interruption, the kind that shields your growth from prying eyes, from those who only want to clap when you're already standing on a stage. So when the bonus landed in my account, an unannounced, unapologetic deposit that could easily wipe out the debt I'd carried for most of my adult life, I said nothing. I didn't mention it at work, didn't slip it into casual conversation over drinks, and certainly didn't let it leak into the family group chat, which had long become a string of forwarded memes and one-liners centered around Brian's latest achievement. I didn't tell them about the new department I helped build from scratch, or the metrics we'd crushed, or the email from the VP who called me the invisible engine of the company. I had learned long ago that in my family, the quieter I succeeded, the less resistance I'd meet. The second I brought up something I was proud of, it was either ignored, belittled, or used as a way to redirect attention back to Brian, whose success always came with fanfare, balloons, and applause. So this time, I let the silence speak for itself. While my brother was busy planning his birthday bash, this one with a speakeasy theme and some Instagram-famous bartender flown in from Los Angeles, I was driving out to view lakefront properties with a realtor who called me Miss Lawrence, even though I told her to just call me Ava. The listings were a dream. I remember standing in the doorway of the third one we visited, watching the sun bounce off the water like it was trying to flirt with the horizon, and thinking, this isn't just a house, it's a reset. It didn't scream luxury. It wasn't meant to. It whispered peace in a language I hadn't heard in years. I made the offer before the sun went down. I didn't haggle. I didn't overthink. I just said yes. Back in the city, the week of my brother's party approached like a parade. Every other day, someone in the family texted about outfits, themes, RSVPs, playlists. My mom asked if I could help set up the lights since Brian was too swamped with his career to take care of the details. My dad, as usual, asked me to bring wine. A decent bottle, he specified, like I didn't know the difference. I nodded through it all. I even showed up early, helped hang the string lights, arranged the bar cart, and smiled when Brian walked in and said, "Wow, looks amazing." "Thanks, sis." No one asked where I'd been that morning. No one noticed the faint trace of lake air still clinging to my sweater. That night, as the party reached full volume, I stepped out onto the balcony, phone in hand, and opened the camera. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I wasn't even thinking about them, really. I just wanted to freeze that moment, the gentle sway of the dock, the glass of white wine in my hand, the way the breeze caught the edge of the photo and made it feel like motion. I posted it to my feed without a caption. No hashtags. No location. Just the image. 10 minutes later, I had a missed call from my mother. Then a message. "Whose place is that?" I left it on read. 2 hours passed. Then another message. "Ava, did you buy that?" Still nothing from me. Not even a read receipt. By the time I got home around midnight, still wearing my party smile and heels that were killing me, my phone looked like it had caught fire. My dad had sent a thumbs up emoji followed by, "Where is this?" My mom had moved from curiosity to concern to something closer to passive-aggressive disbelief. "You should have said something. Are you sure you can afford that? Why didn't you come to us first?" And finally, "You've changed." Brian, of course, took a different approach. His message simply read, "Lot of secrets lately. Just sayin'." To which I almost replied, "You mean like the time you forgot to tell everyone I got into the same college as you?" But I didn't. I wasn't interested in old battles. This wasn't about winning an argument. This was about living a life they couldn't edit, narrate, or co-opt. I didn't block anyone. I didn't delete the messages. I just didn't respond. There was something deeply satisfying in that choice. Not petty silence, not the cold shoulder, but a calm detachment. I didn't need to explain myself to people who had never once asked about my life without somehow tying it back to theirs. 2 days later, my birthday came. Not a text. Not a call. Not even one of those auto-filled birthday posts from people who forget your existence until Facebook reminds them you were born. And yet, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel forgotten. I made coffee in my new kitchen. I walked barefoot across wood floors that still smelled faintly of fresh varnish. I opened every window in the house and let the lake air move through the space like a blessing. That night, I sat on the dock with a blanket, a bottle of wine, and a playlist that had nothing to do with anyone else's mood. No fanfare. No gifts. No cake. Just me, a sky full of stars, and the knowledge that this quiet, earned, unapologetic moment was something they could never take from me because they had never been a part of it in the first place. And still, I knew it wasn't over. Something was coming. I could feel it in the way their silence was starting to stretch longer than usual, like the calm before a storm they thought I wouldn't see coming. But I saw it. I just didn't care. The silence didn't last long. My family has never been good with not knowing something, especially when that something doesn't revolve around them. For 2 whole days, after I posted that lakefront photo, my phone stayed mercifully still, with only the occasional buzz from old coworkers liking the picture or friends commenting something harmless like, "Gorgeous view," or "So peaceful." But beneath those benign reactions, the undercurrent from my family grew darker, more frantic, as if the stillness itself was a threat, as if the absence of an explanation made the image more dangerous than if I had just told them the truth outright. It wasn't the house that bothered them. It was the fact that they didn't see it coming. And when narcissists don't see something coming, they assume it's an attack. The first call came from my father, who rarely called for anything unless something was broken or someone needed to be picked up. He didn't leave a voicemail, but the missed call was like a blinking light in my brain. Then came the text, "Hey kiddo. Saw your photo. Beautiful place. Where is it?" The tone was polite, warm even, which meant he was trying to ease into whatever confrontation he had rehearsed in his head. I didn't answer. A minute later, a second message came through. "You didn't tell us you were looking at houses." Still, I said nothing. It was too early for a conversation that would inevitably unravel into guilt, projection, or worse, a complete dismissal of everything I had earned. I had no interest in watching them try to shrink something so significant into something small enough for them to feel comfortable with. That evening, my mother took a more direct approach. 3 calls. 1 voicemail. And then the message that confirmed everything I already knew she was thinking: "We've always supported you. This secrecy feels hurtful. We're your family. Why hide this from us?" It was laughable, really. For years, I had been the invisible sibling, the one who didn't ask for much, didn't make a scene, didn't expect fanfare, and now, by simply choosing not to broadcast my personal life for their validation, I had somehow become deceitful. Their idea of support had always been transactional. They clapped when I did what they approved of, and they vanished when I made choices that didn't center their narrative. Brian's message didn't even try to feign warmth. "Okay, real talk, are you doing something sketchy? Like, how does someone just buy a vacation house out of nowhere? Dad thinks you're up to something." I stared at the text for a while, torn between fury and amusement. The fact that the possibility of me earning it through hard work and intelligence never even crossed their minds was both insulting and completely expected. I typed out a dozen replies, some biting, some sarcastic, some just the raw truth, but ultimately, I sent nothing. I let the implication hang there, unanswered and unsettling. The following morning, the group chat, usually dormant except for birthday reminders and shared photos of Brian's dog, lit up like it had been plugged into a generator. My mom dropped in first. Just so you know, we're not doing anything for Brian's birthday this year, since it's clearly a sensitive subject now. My dad followed with a passive-aggressive gem. We didn't realize celebrating our son would make you feel so excluded. Our mistake. And then Brian, in all his self-important glory, chimed in, whatever. I don't need a party. Would have been nice, but guess we're all about secrets this year. It was absurd. Their outrage wasn't about the house or even the money, it was about the shift in power. I had done something independently, something visible, and they were no longer in the loop. For the first time, they weren't at the center of my story. And they hated it. I waited 3 days before responding. Not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted to be sure they understood that my silence wasn't indecision, it was intentional. Then, in the middle of a Thursday afternoon, I finally replied. One message. One sentence. Let's not cancel Brian's party. I'll host it. The responses came in fast and confused. My mom asked, "Are you serious?" My dad sent back, "What's going on, Ava?" Brian, predictably, just wrote, "Why?" I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I started planning. If they were going to watch me from the outside, then I would give them something to really stare at. I called the same caterer they used for Brian's last party. I rented outdoor heaters, floral centerpieces, and ordered personalized glassware with Brian's initials, just like they had done for him 5 years ago. I made sure every detail was immaculate, curated to reflect the kind of celebration they had always reserved for him, and never once considered offering me. But here's the twist, everything about the party was designed to make them uncomfortable. The music playlist included songs I loved, but they used to mock. The food was my favorite cuisine, not Brian's. The wine? A collection I had handpicked over the years, none of which they'd recognize. Even the welcome sign at the entrance said, "Welcome to the lake," with no mention of whose party it actually was. They arrived right on time, of course. My mom was in heels too high for the gravel path, my dad in his usual "I'm casual but wealthy" sweater, and Brian with his girlfriend, who I'm pretty sure didn't know my name. They walked through the house slowly, looking at everything like they were searching for clues. When my mom found me near the fireplace, she smiled tightly and said, "This is impressive." I nodded, handed her a glass of wine, and replied, "It should be. I paid for it." An hour into the party, when everyone had a drink in hand and the awkwardness had settled into a tense kind of civility, I stood up, tapped a fork to my glass, and gave a toast. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a speech. I just looked at the people who had spent years ignoring the parts of me they couldn't control and said, "I'm glad you're all here. Really. It's nice to see what it looks like when you show up." Then I sat down. No one said a word. No one clapped. And for once, the silence was mine. No one left the party early, though I suspect more than one person wanted to. The air that night was thick with politeness stretched to its breaking point, the kind that turns smiles into brittle things and laughter into something mechanical, rehearsed. As host, I moved through the crowd with the kind of poise that doesn't come from comfort, but from control. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I was doing it well. Every small detail of that night had been sharpened like a blade, polished until it gleamed just enough to distract from the fact that it could cut. And it did. The guests, mostly friends of my parents and Brian's college buddies, wandered through the house with visible curiosity, admiring the architecture, asking casually how long I had owned the place, complimenting the decor like they were expecting someone to step out from behind a curtain and claim it for themselves. But no one did. Because there was no one else. It was mine. Every square meter, every piece of art on the walls, every candle that burned low on the porch railings, my choices, my money, my silence. Brian spent most of the evening smiling like a man who'd been dared not to blink. He wasn't rude, but he was stiff, clearly unsure how to navigate a reality where the spotlight was shining, yet not pointed at him. His girlfriend, who had never spoken more than 2 full sentences to me in the past, tried to be friendly, but I saw the way her eyes kept drifting to the windows, as if the view unsettled her. Maybe it did. Maybe it was the unfamiliarity of opulence, not built for show but for peace, for distance, for solitude. My mother floated from room to room with a wine glass that she never actually sipped from, complimenting throw pillows and tile finishes with that particular tone she reserved for things she felt both impressed and threatened by. My father stayed near the kitchen island, occasionally offering to help with something he clearly hoped would make him seem involved, useful, less irrelevant. At some point, after the guests had eaten and the speeches had been skipped, my mother pulled me aside under the guise of needing help with the dessert setup. We stood together in the pantry, where the sounds of the party softened to a dull hum, and she looked at me with a mixture of caution and maternal concern that, in the past, might have made me pause. But not now. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, not accusatory, not even angry, just quiet, almost tired. I could tell she wanted me to say something easy, something forgivable. Maybe she hoped I would laugh and say it was just a big surprise, that I was finally stepping out of my shell, that I hadn't meant anything by it. But I didn't. I just looked at her and said, "Because I wanted to see if you'd show up when it wasn't about him." For a second, her face didn't change. She just stood there, holding a dessert fork like it was an anchor. Then she nodded once, barely perceptible, and walked out of the pantry without another word. She left the fork on the counter. Later, while people lingered on the back deck and someone tried to connect a phone to the speaker system to play music they thought would liven things up, I stood at the edge of the lawn with Brian. He had a whiskey in one hand, his tie undone, the top 2 buttons of his shirt open like he'd had a long day, which he hadn't. He looked at me the way brothers sometimes do when they remember too late that they're supposed to know you better than they do. "This place is really something," he said, scanning the horizon like it might offer him a lifeline. "Didn't know you had this in you." I let the words sit there for a moment. Not because I needed time to respond, but because I wanted him to hear how ridiculous they sounded in the silence that followed. "You never asked," I replied, not unkindly, but without effort to soften it. "You never asked about anything." He didn't argue. He just nodded, took a sip, and looked down at the grass like it might answer a question he couldn't quite form. Maybe he thought he was being generous by showing up. Maybe he thought this party was a peace offering. Maybe he was right in some way. But it wasn't about peace. It was about clarity. When the last of the guests left and the fairy lights began to flicker like they, too, had grown tired of pretending, my parents stood in the doorway, unsure whether to hug me or simply say thank you. My dad reached out first, clapping my shoulder like we were teammates at the end of a losing game. My mom kissed my cheek with the stiffness of someone who wasn't sure if the rules still applied. "Thank you for hosting," she said, and though the words were sincere enough, they tasted like something unfamiliar in her mouth. "You're welcome," I replied, holding the door open. "Drive safe." I closed the door behind them and didn't watch them walk to the car. I didn't peek through the window or wait for the engine to start. I just stood there in the entryway, barefoot now, the silence returning like an old friend. Not the empty kind, but the earned kind, the kind that wraps itself around you and says, "They saw it. Finally." And they didn't know what to do with it. And in that moment, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt finished. Not with them, necessarily, but with the part of me that used to wonder what else I could do to earn a place at their table. Because now I had my own. The house felt different once they were gone. Not just empty, but cleansed in a way I hadn't anticipated, like the walls themselves had exhaled. After the dishes had been stacked, the wine glasses rinsed, and the last few half-melted candles extinguished, I walked barefoot across the wooden floors and listened to the stillness settle back in. It wasn't loneliness. It was the echo of something that had finally ended. The performance was over, the audience gone, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for how I chose to exist. The following days unfolded with a strange calm. No one reached out. No text messages. No unexpected phone calls. No desperate attempts to recenter the narrative. Just silence. Not the cold kind they used to weaponize, but a hollow sort of pause, like they were waiting for me to break the ice first. As if, now that I'd made my statement, it was up to me to offer the terms of reconciliation. But I didn't. I had nothing left to clarify. The words had all been said, either directly or implied, and I wasn't interested in pretending that anything was ever going to return to what it was. I drove to the lake house that weekend with a single overnight bag, a journal I hadn't written in for months, and a half-used bottle of wine from the party. The weather had shifted slightly, the summer heat giving way to that gentle crispness that creeps in around early fall, the kind that makes your breath visible in the morning and your thoughts feel sharper. I spent the first few hours doing nothing, just sitting on the dock with my feet dangling above the water, watching the ripples form in the breeze. I kept thinking the stillness would bring some overwhelming emotion, some cinematic wave of regret or liberation, but it didn't. What came instead was clarity. Not in the form of answers, but in the absence of need. I no longer needed their validation. I no longer needed their version of love, which always came laced with conditions and performative gestures. And most of all, I no longer needed them to understand me. The mailbox was one of those small, metal ones at the end of the gravel path, barely large enough for a newspaper, and definitely not designed for the sleek envelopes of corporate America or birthday cards with glitter. But inside, among the circulars and real estate flyers, was a single white envelope addressed to me in handwriting I recognized immediately. It was Brian's. No return address. No postage stamp. He had come in person. I took it inside, poured the last of the wine, and sat by the window before opening it. The note was short, surprisingly so, but it wasn't empty. Ava, I've been the favorite for so long, I forgot what it meant to be a brother. I didn't earn most of what I got, but you did. I see that now. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope, someday, you'll believe that I'm trying to understand. I'm sorry. Brian. There was nothing else. No long explanation. No defense. Just those words, uncharacteristically simple and, dare I say, genuine. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to text him. I didn't even feel vindicated. I just folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into the drawer beside the bed, next to a collection of receipts and spare keys. I didn't need to decide what it meant right then. Some things don't need immediate resolution. Some things are better left simmering, allowed to unfold naturally over time, if they ever unfold at all. Back in the city, a few days later, my phone buzzed again. It was my father. I watched it ring, watched his name flash across the screen like it had 100 times before, but this time I didn't feel that familiar twist in my stomach. I let it ring. No voicemail. Just a missed call, followed by a single text, "Call me." I didn't. Not because I was angry, but because I was done trying to be the one who always answers, always smooths things over, always makes the hard conversations easier by sacrificing my own peace. I didn't owe him a call. Not anymore. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened Instagram, scrolled past the filtered brunches and vacation selfies, and posted a photo. It was a simple one, me sitting at the end of the dock, knees pulled to my chest, the lake stretching out before me like an invitation. In my hand, a glass of wine. On my face, no smile, no expression crafted for others, just stillness. Just truth. I wrote only 2 words in the caption, "Still here." The comments came quickly, from acquaintances, from coworkers, from people who had always known me as the quiet one, the background player, the girl who never needed much. They called it beautiful, peaceful, empowering. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that it wasn't about peace or power. It was about finally letting go of the weight of waiting. Waiting to be seen. Waiting to be chosen. Waiting to be enough. My family didn't comment. They didn't like the post. They didn't reach out again, not that day, not that week. And maybe they never will. Maybe Brian meant every word of that letter, and maybe he didn't. Maybe my parents were sitting in their house, trying to figure out where they went wrong, or maybe they still believed they did everything right. I don't know. I might never know. And strangely, I was okay with that. Some stories don't end with an apology wrapped in a bow or a hug that melts years of silence. Some endings are just that, an ending. No explosion. No confrontation. Just a choice, quiet and final. A door that closes with a soft click and doesn't reopen. They always forgot my birthday. Every single year. But this time, I gave them something they'll remember. And I didn't have to say a word.